Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Sunday Morning Quarterback. We are three pastors who love ministry, leadership, and sports. It is great to be with you. One of our counterparts is not here today. He is taking care of sick kids. But of course, Dad, he would not be on the Cowboys episode. What is that, Adam?
I think he threw in the towel. He knows we're going to talk some shop, some good Cowboy stuff. And the day that the Liberty Flames beat the first SEC team, come on, Adam, you should have been here.
Man, his team, he's not here, but man, we're so excited. We have the RJ Ochoa. For those of you that don't know, he is RJ. I would say you are one of the voices of the Cowboys, especially on Twitter. You keep everybody sane, and so you might have heard his podcast, The Ochoa, which I listen to weekly, or Blogging the Boys down there at SB Nation. So, RJ, you having a good day so far, sir?
I am. Thank you guys for having me. It's great to be here. It's exciting. It was an interesting week with the Cowboys off. Certainly affords some more opportunities to kind of just hang out and enjoy things a little bit differently. But yeah, I feel kind of refreshed and ready for the next little deep breath through Thanksgiving. And so this season has been really surprising in a lot of different ways. So I'm anxious to see what else it has in store.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, hey, before we jump in, RJ, we know you're out there in the motherland of Texas, but we're down here in the South. And last week, all of our church members were Georgia, Tennessee. So I got to give a shout out. Georgia showed up. I didn't think they did, but Dad, woo, they shut that offense down. We ain't singing Rocky Top today. We were going to open the show with Rocky Top, but maybe they'll have a rematch, but who knows. So shout out to you Georgia fans. But it was a wild day in the NFL, college. So RJ, I'm going to pass it to you first. What stuck out to you this football weekend? What caught your eye?
You know, it feels like in many ways, like this is a fake NFL season, you know, like it doesn't feel like the ones that we're just kind of used to. Like we haven't had this crazy like offensive showing or anything like that. It just feels, maybe hollow is not the right word, but it feels a little bit masquerading. And so it was strange to kind of see the Vikings struggle against the Commanders. It was strange to see the Bills fall to the Jets. You know, meanwhile, there are some things that are remaining consistent. You know, the Colts continuing to kind of flounder. I think, you know, it was so also weird. You kind of look forward to something like this and it's like, okay, well, the Cowboys aren't playing. Let me kind of dive into the rest of the division. Washington, the only team playing on Sunday, obviously with Philly winning on Thursday night. And so I really enjoyed the early slate. The afternoon was a bit dull with only the two games happening. And the night game kind of saved the day for me. You know, yeah, it's always fun to kind of just sit back and hang out with Scott Hansen on the Red Zone channel. And so I'm grateful for another week, but yeah, the Bills losing and I'd say the Vikings staying status quo were the two biggest takeaways for me.
Crazy weekend. Dad, what stuck out to you?
Well, watching Tampa Bay and the Rams have a lackluster game. And that kind of summarizes a lot what's going on in the NFL. To kind of see two great teams and then at the same time see Green Bay lose to the Lions.
Wow.
I mean, are you kidding me? To see that, to see him have a poor game and then to see the Rams in Tampa, there's just a shift. You can kind of see the shift going on with some new leaders, some new blood. To see the Jets, I mean, I'm a fan of the Jets. I think they got a good coach. I think they got some swagger, and I think they got a lot of fight. And then also, you know, here in Nashville country, it was good to see the Titans there. Really, I see the Titans of last year. They have their quarterback. I think they win the game. So some interesting things, but just to see some Giants really begin to take a step down is interesting so far this year.
Yeah, that's definitely helpful for us. Man, the Rams, I mean, Super Bowl hangover, just like we almost see just about every year. Crazy to see how much they've fallen off. Another thing that jumped out was the Dolphins. They struggled with the Bears, so that makes that Cowboys win look a little bit better. Bears are finally starting to come into something. Like you said, Jets, I think nobody saw that coming. I mean, the Jets have been playing pretty good, but Buffalo, you saw Josh Allen get a little bit injured. You know, he's been running a lot. Can they keep him healthy? But, man, the Raiders, you just keep waiting for him to turn it around. Devontae Adams finally had some early touchdowns, and man, they just can't get it together. And you got to think Josh McDaniels is starting to feel on the hot seat. Cardinals too. Cliff Kingsbury, I mean, he got all the talent. He's got his receiver back and just still fluttering. But RJ, we got some breaking news today. We saw Frank Reich out of Indianapolis. What were your first thoughts when you saw that?
I know you're both men of faith, and so I'm not too proud of this, but I've really been hard on the Colts this season, and I've called them frauds a few times, and so not my most Christian behavior, but I mean that's kind of who they've been. I really feel like they've been a team and an organization void of accountability, and I feel I've heard a lot of interviews with Frank Reich. He's a man of faith. I'm a huge fan of Frank Reich, the human being. But it just hasn't worked for them, and it really felt like they had no issues kind of selling Carson Wentz out over the offseason and really kind of pinned all of their failures from last season on him, and just kind of expected everything to return to where they wanted it to, just simply because they wanted it to. And so those things don't work that way. It's a very difficult business winning in the NFL, and so I hate to say I called it or I told you so, but this was really predictable from a long way ago, and so. Sometimes the inevitable thing ultimately winds up happening.
And you got to ask, how much is Jim Irsay meddling? Because you see Chris Ballard, he seems to know what he's doing. You see Frank Reich, had success in Philly. And then so, just off and on with the quarterbacks and Matt Ryan. And so, I don't know. I just feel like that was kind of a tough situation to be in. But personally, I think Frank Reich won't have any problem getting another head coaching job. Deb, what do you think?
Well, I agree with you guys. In the last few years, you saw the Colts having a strong defense and a great offensive line. That is usually a recipe for success, but for some reason they could not get that quarterback right. And so if it just shows, if you don't get the quarterback right, it doesn't matter if you have a good defense and a good offensive line. It just doesn't work. And so, at the end of the day, they had to do what they had to do. But I think another interesting thing is Jeff Saturday.
Yeah.
I did not see that one coming at all. What did you guys think about that?
What did you think, RJ?
I've never seen anything like that, and I always think it's silly. A lot of Cowboys fans have said things in the past, like let Tony Romo be offensive coordinator, let Sean Lee be defensive coordinator. It felt very cut from that cloth. You mentioned the Volunteers. There was a thought that Jason Witten would be their head coach, and it was silly when that was a thing. And so I understand it's on an interim basis only, but I have a hard time believing how anybody who's affiliated with that organization doesn't enjoy how they're going to enjoy this new set of circumstances. I think it's difficult when you have somebody or something that kind of makes you the butt of the joke, and I think that's why things are so overwhelming for the Broncos right now. For right, wrong, or indifferent reasons, they're just kind of this huge joke, and that's such a difficult thing that weighs on you so much. And so now you've got this dude who shows up mid-season to be your interim head coach. It's difficult not to think less of the Colts after the course of Monday's events.
Yep, I just got to think Chris Ballard's on the clock because I can't see him sticking out. That's got Jim Irsay's fingerprints all over it. But, hey, so RJ, when we were preaching in church, man, we always tell them we take our biblical theology very seriously, and we believe that the Bible teaches that the wise men followed the star. So our counterpart, Adam, he always, I don't want to talk about the Cowboys. So we really hadn't talked that much, but today he's not here, and we got RJ Ochoa on, so we're going to talk about the boys. So RJ, give us some truth serum. We're off a bye week. Dak came back. He's looking good. Didn't do anything at the trade deadline. How deep, realistically, do you think the Dallas Cowboys can go this year?
I feel I'm really conflicted. I feel a lot of things. They have some obvious weaknesses and some obvious holes, and we have 30 years of scar tissue built up that kind of force us to kind of assume the worst. And so it's difficult to kind of peer through to find a needle in this haystack. But they play in a really weak NFC, right? And they play in a really weak NFL as a whole. I remember I wrote something 5 years ago in 2017 about how they didn't take advantage of Carson Wentz getting hurt and being lost for the season in Philadelphia. Odell Beckham Jr. got hurt and missed the rest of the season. The Packers had a down year that year. And so it just kind of felt like, man, you had this opportunity that was right for the taking, and you just kind of lost it. And so I feel that way now. Kudos to them. I did not believe I certainly believed less after week one, and felt confirmed in my own opinions about this team, because I feel like every negative thing that people thought about them kind of showed up in that week one loss to Tampa. And again, credit to Mike McCarthy and his staff for kind of digging in and digging themselves out. And I mean, it's all there for the taking. They have six, they need 11 wins to guarantee themselves a playoff spot. I don't care how you get in. You're a wild card division, winning team. They need 11. They still have all four against the AFC South, including the Titans game. I know you guys are excited for. They still have the Commanders. They still have the Giants on a short week at home. They still have the Eagles on Christmas Eve. I know we're all super pumped about that. They still have this really bad Packers team. And so how deep can they go? I mean, who are they drawing in the first round? I mean, they're not going to go to Philly in all likelihood in the first round. I mean, are they going to go to Minnesota? Are we really nervous about that? Probably not. Are they going to go to Seattle? Okay, yeah. I mean, they're a little bit cute. Are they going to go to Tampa? I mean, they're going to go to Atlanta. And so I am very confident they'll get through the wild card round. And I mean, it's such a fickle game. I mean, this is a team, Dez caught it, Jared Cook on 3rd and 20. These crazy things have happened to keep them out of the territory that they've been absent from for 3 decades. There's no reason why they can't win the Super Bowl, why they can't get to a title game, why they can't win, 13 games. There's no reason. It's all right in front of them. And Cooper Rush, I think, deserves a lot of credit for that, for keeping all of their goals helping keep all their goals in front of them, because it seemed all for naught at week one.
Yep, I agree. And if we had to put it in one word, Dak, baby, this is your year. I think we all had high expectations coming off, he's healthy, coming off the contract year. This is the year he could really seed himself at that, top 5 quarterback, and coming out slow, and then his first game back, and then finally against the Bears, we're starting to see him coming into form. Honestly, I think it's Kellen Moore. If Kellen Moore can not get too cute and call a good game, but I think Dak has such an opportunity to really catapult himself. And so I think defense is going to be there. Obviously, we got some things to shore up on the run. But I think we go as far as Dak takes us. And, I mean, Dak, Jimmy G, I'm still taking Dak after last year. We all have a little heartburn thinking about that game. But I think Dak has a good opportunity. It'd be nice if we can get some of our injured guys back. But at the end of the day, I think that's what it comes down to. It comes down to, can Kellen and Mike not mess it up, and can Dak play good enough? Dad, what do you think?
Well, I have a question for Ocho. What do you think about that Dallas run defense? Is that something that can be shored up? I know we just picked up a guy from the Raiders, but is that something that concerns you and concerns Dallas? Should concern Dallas?
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're going to get there, you in all likelihood have to go through Philly at some point, right? Like sometimes that doesn't happen, right? And to be clear, like that everything exists in the world of possibilities. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that my Houston Astros won the World Series, but they didn't have to play the mighty Los Angeles Dodgers. They didn't have to play the San Diego Padres in Juan Soto, right? Like, because things broke their way. Like it's a weird world. It's a weird sport. And so you might not have to play the Philadelphia Eagles. Things could go any number of ways. And so, but yeah, I mean, I think you have to acknowledge that. But I do think if I've learned over the course of the season to trust anything, it's that, they'll kind of figure this out in the sense of, I mean, you mentioned Jimmy G, like they were really embarrassed last year. I mean, they were outworked, and it's one thing to be beaten, but it's another thing to just kind of be dominated like that and really kind of be put into a corner or stuffed into a locker. And this is a team, that over the offseason wanted to get tougher, they called them glass eaters. They wanted to get, some bad dudes, who, obviously bad on the field. And I think I trust them to figure that out. And that's so much easier said than done. I don't think Jonathan Hankins makes this seismic difference individually, but I do trust them. And it comes down to those lulls. I know you're going to the Tennessee game. That is such an important thing. So the Cowboys are playing a road Thursday game coming off of a short week for the first time ever. Their road Thursday games have only come the Thursday after Thanksgiving in the past, when they've had kind of a normal week. Now, to be fair, they play on Christmas Eve the week before, which is a Saturday. So there's still a little bit of a benefit there, but they get that little mini bye the week before the regular season finale. And that's such an important thing. I mean, I would have loved for this team to have had just a few more days before San Francisco a year ago. And so I think they have just the checkpoints for their season are placed at the right time to give them as much of an advantage as you can get from those things. And so, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a fence riding answer to say I trust them to figure it out. But I totally get if you're worried about it. If they have an Achilles heel, it's certainly defending the run.
Yeah,
that's one of the things that I'm watching. I think the only teams I'm really concerned is, of course, the Eagles and the Niners, and they both have good running offenses. I'm not as concerned if we do happen. Cowboy Nation, we think is as high as we can go, but I'm not as concerned with Buffalo and Kansas City, even though they're fantastic teams, but their offense kind of suits our defense. But it's that the Eagles and the Niners, they're
right.
physical teams. They match up against us real well. Everybody else I'm not too concerned with. But that's going to be the difference, I think. What we can do with that running offense is going to be fun to watch.
Well, fellas, while we're talking about the Cowboys, RJ, big week coming off a bye. We got the Packers. And I just saw Mike McCarthy's press conference. He started getting a little emotional. I think this is the first time going back to Green Bay. And just initially for me, this feels like a trap game because the Packers are just playing terrible. And you just keep thinking, okay, they're going to get out of it. They're going to get out of the rut. And then they just keep going further and further. So how do you feel coming off a bye this week versus the Packers?
I'm really excited. And I haven't wanted a game as much as I want this one in a long time. And I mentioned scar tissue. I mean, you could say the Cowboys are favored by 100 points. I think we'd all, on some level be like, yeah, but it's Aaron Rodgers. And yeah, it's the Packers. And so, but I do think that great teams find a way, find some sort of slight. And I do think the Cowboys have really rallied around Mike McCarthy. And I think that's kind of their lightning rod for this week. It is his first trip back. And it's not just, your first trip back, you got fired, whatever. I mean, they really embarrassed him on the way out. They took every opportunity to kind of sell him out too. Certainly Aaron Rodgers did. And so I do think there's this matter of like, hey, look, everybody, Mike was not the problem here and the main reason, the culprit for why things fell apart 4 years ago. And so, but on the one hand, I certainly do think that it's a trap game, but I think that great teams power through trap games. I think that's right. what separates teams is you acknowledge it's a trap game and you say, okay, cool, we're going to get trapped. Let's go win by 30. And so I'm so excited. I really, the Cowboys have 2 wins at Lambeau Field. Like you would never think that just because of their long history. But they've only, and to be fair, Dak Prescott authored the most recent one 6 years ago. And so it's going to be epic. I haven't been this pumped for a Cowboys game. And this, the Eagles game was obviously a lot of fun, but I think we all had this, measured level of pumped upness just because we knew there was this ceiling with Cooper Rush at quarterback. But this is different. This is, the moment the light flashes green, just take off and end them. Like leave no doubt. That's kind of how I feel about this game, and I'm really excited.
Yep. I agree wholeheartedly with RJ. I think it's going to be a fantastic game for Cowboy fans to watch. I think the defense, they're going to come screaming off the sides. I can see that defense getting 6, 7, 8 sacks. They want to play for their coach. It's off of a bye week. I think they're going to be itching to play. I think Dak wants to show himself. So I think offense is going to be hitting all strides. I think defense is going to be hitting all strides. And I think Rodgers is going to be heading for the showers early. So this is going to be a fun one to watch.
And Dallas has never had a unifying moment around McCarthy. And I mean, let's be honest, because most of us want Sean Payton next year. But it'd be nice to see hey, let's win this one for Mike. His first time going back in Green Bay. He's obviously feeling all the emotions, and so who knows? That could be a nice little unifying moment for the team. But we'll see. Hey, fellas, before we move on and wrap up our sports segments, in short, what is if you had to bring it down to one biggest surprise so far of the NFL season, RJ, what would it be?
Of the entire season, I would say the down offense as a whole. I mean, this is a league where offense has risen and gotten more productive year after year after year after year. And it makes sense that eventually that it would top off or have some sort of regression. But this has been a severe regression. And so it's just kind of shocking to see how difficult it is for so many teams to move the ball. You wonder how long the NFL is going to be in this funk. What kind of rule the league wants offense to kind of lead the way. So what kind of rule changes they're going to institute against that. But yeah, it's been strange to see so many teams as weaker versions of themselves.
What would you say is the cause of that? You think a little bit of it's preseason, or do you? I know Cowherd talks a lot about poor offensive line play. What do you pinpoint it to be?
I think that, and I think teams are so much more wise and efficient with how they play defense. And so that just takes its toll, and there's some necessary time to kind of adjust to that and learn through that. The Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay offensive scheme really overtook the NFL for about a 7-year window there, and so you're kind of at the end of that now. And so it's a matter of who's next, what's next, what can we design and put together and institute to kind of find a way to overcome this. And so I think we're waiting for that breakthrough, and once it happens, I mean, it is such a copycat league that it'll start spreading its way across all the teams.
Dad, biggest surprise in short.
You said one team, the Tampa Jets. No, I'm just joking. I'm just joking. That's not a joke, but my biggest surprise is to see the shift between the quarterbacks, the old quarterbacks and the new quarterbacks. You're really starting to see that whole fresh young guns come about. And of course, you're seeing some of the old guards struggling. And so just to kind of see, we're seeing it before our very eyes, particularly in this year, see a shift in the quarterback, these new stars coming about.
You say that, but I feel like Herbert's regressed. I mean, I know he's got the ribs. Hadn't heard a lot about Herbert. That's been something I'm keep my eye on. But if there's one thing I was the most surprised about, it's the AFC West. I mean, we had such high hopes, and, it's going to be a shootout, and all these teams, and the Chargers have just lackluster. Denver stinks. The Raiders stink. And so that's been, for me, the biggest shock of the NFC season. But got a good game coming up Sunday with the Cowboys. Well, guys, normally here, this is where we transition from sports to ministry and leadership. But today we have a really neat opportunity. RJ, no pressure, but you're the first non-pastor guest to be on the show here. But the reason why, how we kind of got linked up is, RJ, I follow your stuff, and I just noticed you started sharing a little bit about your faith, and I thought that was super cool, and I shot you a DM, and we just kind of started messaging back and forth. And so, RJ, if you would, maybe just kind of introduce tell us a little bit about your family, maybe tell us a little bit about your sports career, how it started, and then ultimately, share a little bit about maybe your personal testimony or your walk with Christ or how you became a Christian.
Sure. I think if I trace back, the origins of my faith as far as I can in my mind, when I was about 13 years old, city I was living in at the time with my parents, just kind of started going to church, had some friends going to church, got really into it, got on fire for Christ, went to church camp, one weekend. I don't remember how long it was at the time. I know you guys are really familiar with those sorts of things. And just was so on fire and gave my life to Christ there. And had a few other times in my life. I'm sure you guys run into this a lot where when you're a kid, you kind of feel like, oh, I sinned again. I have to go give my life to Christ. So I have to redo it, whatever. And so kind of went through that. But, there was a time, I'm an only child. And I look back and at how independent I was or how on fire I was able to make these things happen. I would have other friends and their parents come pick me up at my house when my parents didn't want to go. I look back and think like, wow, that was I can't believe the 13-year-old me did that. My parents got divorced about a year later, and that was a really difficult thing for my mom. And my mom just kind of dove into her faith and really just kind of clung to that. And I lived with my mom throughout high school, and I was in such a difficult place. I really didn't want anything to do with it. I just kind of let my mom do her thing, and she would pray for me and fast for me and things like that. And obviously I was really grateful, but I went to college and just started living my own life and kind of had a hard time in college. I mean, just was really lazy and really, really not driven. And I've always had a great relationship with each of my parents, but, just couldn't put it together. And so in the summer of 2012, I was an engineering major, and I told my parents, I was like, I do not want to do this. I feel a little bit lost. I have no idea what I want to do. And I've never really felt that way in life. I'd always had some sort of direction. And so, my dad said to me, I've always been very close to them. We always had the Cowboys in common. So what do you want to do? Which is a really intimidating question when you're like 21 years old. And I said, I love the Cowboys. And I was just somebody who was always obsessed with it and always annoying people with it. And so they said, well, what this is an era where Twitter was kind of taken off and social media was really becoming kind of part of our lifestyle. And so I had been fortunate that I had won this retweet to enter contest with the Cowboys. It was an autograph photo of Walt Garrison and the Cowboys director of social media at the time, Shannon Gross. I was in Dallas on a weekend. off chance, shot him a DM, said, hey, do you want to have lunch? And so he said, yes. This was all kind of in that same window. Had lunch with Shannon and just kind of learned about his job and thought like, man, that is so interesting. I have no idea how to get here, but this is where I need to get to. So I told my parents that, and I'm from the Rio Grande Valley, which is the southern tip of Texas. I said, I guess I got to move to Dallas. And my dad said, well, that's kind of far. And I think as a parent was saying, if you're this directionless, maybe you shouldn't move somewhere totally far where we can't help you. He said, why don't you try moving to San Antonio, which was about 4 hours from my hometown. And so I moved to San Antonio and was trying to figure things out. And I got a job. I went to buy a Cowboys flag for my apartment that I had just moved into. And here in the state of Texas, there are Cowboys post shops, which are like retail stores. And they just have 100% Cowboys merchandise. And so I went there, bought the flag, and just kind of started talking to the manager. And she thought I was cool, and I got a job there. And I thought it felt like a foot in the door. It felt like I'm somewhat connected to the Cowboys here. And I was fortunate that I met my wife at that store. So it was obviously a really productive thing. But it helped me kind of learn life in corporate America, start to take on some responsibilities, start to kind of understand the way this world works. And I had gotten a little bit sucked into it. And I think, I wanted this promotion at the time. And I think if I'd gotten it, I'd probably still be working there, but I didn't get it. And I was so upset and so motivated. And at the time, my grandmother had just died, and my mom, who had been through such a hard time, was really close with her. And when my grandmother passed, I asked to have one thing, and it was her Bible. And my grandmother read, I'm sure you're familiar with The Upper Room every day. And so my mom, and this was all kind of happening at the same time. I know I'm jumping stories, but my mom one day was having a really hard time on the phone after I was talking to her on the phone after my grandmother passed. I said, do you want me to just read to you from Grandma's Bible? And that felt like just an idea in the moment. And she said, sure. So I opened it up, and my grandmother she had marked in Ecclesiastes 3 and the Lord's Prayer, she had those marked with photos of me, which was a really touching thing to discover in that moment. That was April of 2014. And ever since then, every day, my mom and I have read The Upper Room together on the phone. Wow. If one of us is traveling or something like that, we find time to read it together. And I read it from my grandmother's Bible just because, I could, then I use the YouVersion app now and all sorts of stuff, but I just don't want to do that. And so doing that with my mom, kind of getting my life together, I, started to kind of feel a little bit whole, and obviously was getting more connected to God. And my wife is so strong in her faith that, meeting her and starting to date her, everything was kind of lining up for me in that sense. God was, at the time, I didn't realize, working so much in my life. And in 2015, I didn't get that promotion. I said, I gotta figure something out. And I had stalled with trying to do this with the Cowboys. And so I found a blog. It's still called Inside the Star. Emailed the boss and said, hey, I would love to write about the Cowboys. I don't know what to do, but I would love to write about them. He said, okay, cool. So we kind of figured something out. I was initially writing 5 articles a week. And we had just started a podcast. So hey, anytime you can use me, I would love to be on the podcast, talk about the Cowboys, whatever. So kind of started to do this. The Cowboys were terrible in 2015, which did not help my career take off. But it was a powerful year to kind of learn as Matt Castle and Kellen Moore made their way through the sludge. And I had started to blog and was growing more and going to church with my wife, and kind of life was coming together. And in 2016, when I was living in San Antonio, they had a radio competition. The local radio station, sports radio station, it was like an open mic competition. It was called Rock the Mic. And I went, and I was very fortunate and very favored by God to have won. And so I got to, they had 2 local shows. I would pop in and do, things. I would fill in for guys, not getting paid anything. That's not a life I would recommend to anybody. I was very fortunate that I had a support system that I could lean on. And that happened to be the Dak and Zeke year. So that happened to be the year they needed a Cowboys guy and all sorts of stuff. The Super Bowl that year happened to be in Houston. And so they said, hey, look, we cannot pay for you to go, but we can get you a credential. We would love to have some extra hands. I had family in Houston, drove the 3 hours and worked Radio Row. And I went to Radio Row with them 2 years in a row. After some successes, reached out to Blogging the Boys. I had been reading that site my whole life, and got hooked up here. It's just kind of a part-time, writer, while growing in my faith, and all these things kind of happening, in parallel with one another. And I'd been at Blogging the Boys for a year when a full-time position opened up in the spring of 2018. I was very fortunate, very favored again to get the job. And that year, that summer in 2018, I was on the phone with my dad one night, just talking shop, talking about whatever. And he said, my wife's name is Cammie. We weren't married at the time, but we were planning our wedding. And he said, next summer for our summer trip in 2019, how would you and Cammie like to go to Israel? I was like, well, dude, that'd be pretty sick. And we were talking it out, and I said, by the way, that's mom's like dream vacation, right? And he said, yeah, well, she's coming too. And I was just, like, what? I was like, what? Like, I had no idea they were, kind of talking or anything like that. And sure enough, I don't know. I still don't know if I should call it if they dated or whatever. It's such awkward and weird terminology. But that first season in 2018, the Amari Cooper trade and everything happened as my wife and I were getting ready to get married, as my parents were kind of reconnecting. And then in the spring of 2019, my wife and I got married. My parents got remarried later that summer. And then we all went to Israel together for about 2 weeks. It was really, and at that point, I'd reached such a strong level of faith. It was so, so cool to be there, and so cool. I think this is a weird way to put it, but to see so many like facts and moments from the Bible supported by archaeological fact, and to see those things come to life was such a fascinating and really powerful experience for me to be there with my wife. And we were newly married at the time, and my parents. It just all felt like a dream. I mean, it all still does feel like a dream. And so obviously COVID hit a few months after the fall started that year. My wife and I had gotten a dog. We thought, okay, we're about to start our life and everything. And the summer of 2020, and I'd been working, obviously covering the Cowboys in that whole time. We just kind of, we were trying to start our family, and we said, well, let's move. She said, let's move to be closer to your parents. I mean, we want to have a baby. Your parents can be around to raise them, help us, not to raise them, obviously, but so we moved in the summer of 2020 in the peak of COVID. It was a challenging thing, but we now live 5 minutes from my parents, and my son gets to see his grandma and grandpa. And I can't believe how blessed I am. But I would be completely lost without my wife. And I've learned so much about faith and my faith through her, and being my partner and having that support, and everything we've been through together. And it's been an incredible life that I've gotten to live. And I wake up every day, and I work at home, and I do the shows that we do barefoot. And, then when I'm done, I go play with my son or hug my wife. And, it's just, I can't believe how much God has worked through my life. And so it's, I try to use the teeny tiny platform I have to glorify God, because I mean, I wouldn't be anything without him. And I know that you both believe that too. And so, it's a really crazy thing. And I'm so always astounded that anybody can explain things like this any other way than God. I just can't imagine how anybody else can believe that. I respect all beliefs, obviously.
Yep.
But I can't, in my mind, understand how anybody can think anything else.
Wow, that's awesome. Real cool hearing God's kind of provision of your life. Real quick, and we'll land the plane here. Here's just, we always like to give a food for thought question. RJ, I'll start with you, and then Dad, I'll kind of pass it to you. In our current day in society, what are some challenges of being a Christian in the sports media world? And, we see so much today. Let's just be honest. The Bible is attacked. Christian views are attacked. And we're seeing a lot of stuff in sports media. So someone with your platform, what are some challenges of holding Christian values and beliefs, but being involved in a world that believes differently than us? What are some challenges you've seen?
I think for me, I like to have a lot of fun, and sometimes fun can steer us away from the path that God wants us on. Not all fun, obviously, but some types of fun. And so, my job is to create content about the Cowboys, right? And to create engagement. And so, Cowboys beat the Eagles 50-0. Like, what's fun is to like embarrass the Eagles, right? Like and it sounds funny and silly, but like it's so I do struggle with that, right? Jalen Hurts has a bad game, whatever. Like I don't, on the one hand, like, okay, if we're gonna drag this guy on Twitter, it's gonna go off. People are gonna enjoy it, but that's something I feel comfortable with. And so I do struggle with that all the time. is knowing the balance of what's fair, of what's not. Fair is not the right word. But that's the struggle I feel. I think social media and things like this, you kind of get out of them what you put into them. And so I've always tried to use my platform, the teeny tiny one that I have, to be honest about my faith. And I'm going to fall in my faith. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to do something that I wish I hadn't, or not do something that I wish I had. And so I think for me, it's a constant game of trying to understand how to live like Christ, and doing that when it's not popular. I understand that's the crux of a lot of Christianity, but that plays itself out in my world a lot.
Dad, I'm gonna pass it off, and you can land the plane here. But let's frame it this way, and let's be honest. Even RJ in the church world, it's tough for us navigating all these social things and political things, and that's in a Christian circle. Whereas yourself, everybody, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And so, Dad, here's how I'd frame it. As a pastor, somebody who's been in ministry all your life, Dad, any thoughts or words of wisdom? I know we admire the Tim Tebows of the world that stand on the front lines and take some of the hits and don't, they're grace and truth. They don't back down from what they believe, but they represent Christ well. So any recommendations or words of wisdom or encouragement for RJ and the platform that he has?
Yeah, I think Jesus covered it well. From the Old Testament even to the New Testament, he said, hey, at the end of the day, love God with all that you are, your heart, mind, soul, and strength, everything that you are, and love your neighbor as yourself. I think if we can continue to make that the main frame of who we are, because ultimately, we love God most when we love others more than we love ourselves. And so I would hold to that. We're always going on our faith. The closer we are to the Lord, the more fruit that we will be able to bear. And so, as long as, we stay close to Jesus, allow that love. If we try to love the world with our own love, there's limits. But when we love God most and seek him, and then in turn, through that love that we have, that we're learning in God, then love the world, then there's no limits to that. This world is looking for something more. And so they're looking for kindness. They're looking for true love. They're looking for what is real, what is right. And so we have all the answers. I think sometimes we overcomplicate things and try to over-spiritualize things. At the end of the day, love God, love your neighbor, and allow God to work in you and through you. So when we're close, when he is the branch and we are the vines, and we have that connection, the Holy Spirit will lead us and guide us in all areas, and we can be a difference maker and a champion for Jesus.
That's awesome, and we need more Christians out there on the front lines, whether it be in the school systems or on sports or on TV or in the political atmosphere. And that's what we are as Christians. We are to be live sent into a world that needs the truth. And so, RJ, we appreciate you being on with us, man. We maybe next season we'll have you back on. Everybody have a great day. Go Cowboys.
Go Cowboys.